I'd say it was the most impactful because it was the first time that photos appeared in the media showing what happens out at sea during a rescue mission. I don't think any photographers had actually been out to sea before that. Certainly not in Malta, and I'm not too sure how it was on an international level. There may have been something off the Canary Islands, but certainly not in the Mediterranean. It was a long time ago, it was 2005, so it's a pretty old picture, but you know how it is, the first picture always has the strongest impact because it's totally new to people. But it's a picture which still gets published on a regular basis all over, even today, like 10 years later. I first started covering migration as part of my daily work as a newspaper photographer. So, there would be migrants landing or some sort of incident, and I would go there simply to cover the story for a daily newspaper or for the wire services. However, with time, because as the body of work grew and grew, I started feeling it was perhaps time to consolidate things and look a bit more into depth in certain things. So I started doing a lot more stories about the daily lives over here, whether it be in detention camps or refugee camps or however. And my interest in it just grew and grew. The more I got to know personal stories of migrants, the more I felt it's really important to let the world know what is happening. Because it's not a clear-cut issue. I mean, most people sort of do not quite understand why they are fleeing from where they're fleeing, and many people question the fact that they do that. So I think it's really important to take a humanistic approach, a humanitarian approach, and educate the public, I suppose, in a way. That's sort of what I'm trying to do with my photos. The way people react to your presence when you're there as a photographer varies a lot on the sort of circumstances, of that particular event. Whilst the rescue mission is taking place, for example, nobody is bothered or hassled by your presence over there. Half the time, even though they're looking straight at you, they're not even aware of your presence. You find out later. Once you start meeting the migrants, in the camps and their homes and so on, then you have to be a bit more careful because there are issues of privacy. You are kind of going into their home, so you need their permission to work and so on. Very often they do not want pictures taken, and you have to respect that. One thing which I've noticed recently is it's become a lot harder to do these sort of pictures about their daily lives because what's happening here in Malta is we're not having any new arrivals. So the people who are here have been here for a long time. Their levels of frustration are building, and the last thing they want is photographers coming over to the open centre or whatever to try and take pictures of them to tell their stories. They've been through it so many times that they're basically fed up of it, and you can't blame them. Now in the past it was different because you always had new constant influx of new people, then it was easier to get those sort of stories and so on. Now it's, the last couple of times I've tried it, it's been a bit more complicated. After shooting the story for, 15 years, something like that, I've obviously seen a lot. There've been some great, really sort of heartwarming stories. The one which always comes to mind is the story of Hamad al-Russan, the Syrian-Palestinian blue-eyed blonde kid who I photographed after he'd been rescued from the Lampedusa tragedy in 2013. There's a great story to that, and how sort of people saw the photo in the papers and then they tried to find the family and help the family, help them with clothing, with schooling, with finding jobs, help them sort of get relocated to Germany and so on. So, all the help this family received was a direct result of people seeing that photo. If I didn't take the photo or the photo hadn't been published, then none of this would have happened to the family. I mean, they were the lucky ones. I mean, they've been hundreds of other kids that I've photographed and have published their pictures, but the image doesn't have the same impact. I think one reason why Hamad's photo had such an impact is because he was blonde, blue-eyed and white-skinned. I mean, let's face it, that is probably the main reason, because people could think, European people, Maltese people could say, that could be my kid. Which they obviously don't feel the same way about an Eritrean or Somali or Sudanese child. On the other hand, there have been times when I've experienced, sort of very negative emotions as well. I mean, when you attend funerals, memorial services, when you see dead bodies being brought ashore, I mean, that is quite tough. I mean, seeing the amount of despair that there was surrounding the funeral of those 29 migrants who were brought to Malta last April, when some 900 drowned off our shores. I mean, that was a very intense and emotional thing. And though you protect yourself behind the camera, you're a human being. You can't help but feel, somehow, feel the impact. Very often the impact sort of strikes you afterwards. There's times when you're so busy concentrating on the images, and it's happened to me doing rescue missions as well. You're so busy thinking about all the things you have to think about there and then to get the pictures. That's only afterwards, when you're browsing through the photos on your laptop, that it's sometimes kind of hits you like that, because you don't always notice these things on the spot.